The blood was warm, sticky, pooling at my feet like a cruel accusation, each drop a reminder of the choice I'd made. His eyes, those piercing blue eyes that once held me like a lifeline, now burned with a fury I'd never seen. "You've gone too far, Ethan," he whispered, voice trembling, "and I can't follow you anymore." I stood frozen in that grimy alley behind O'Malley's bar, the neon lights flickering above us, casting jagged shadows on the cracked pavement. Chicago's summer heat clung to my skin, but it was his words that suffocated me. Caleb, my Caleb, was slipping away, and I could feel the weight of it crushing my chest. We'd been here before, fights, promises, stolen kisses in the dark. But this time was different. This time, the gun in my hand was still smoking, and the man lying dead at our feet wasn't just a stranger. It started 6 months ago, in the kind of spring that makes you believe in second chances. Caleb and I met at a community center fundraiser, both of us dragged there by well-meaning friends. I was 26, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a chip on my shoulder, hiding who I was behind a forced smile. Caleb, 24, was a barista with dreams of being a painter, his laugh like sunlight breaking through clouds. He wore his heart on his sleeve, unapologetically himself, while I was still learning what that meant. Our first conversation was about art, his passion, my ignorance. He talked about colors like they were emotions, and I hung on every word, mesmerized by the way his hands moved, like he was painting the air. By the end of the night, we were sitting on the hood of my truck, sharing a cigarette under the stars, our thighs touching just enough to send sparks through me. I didn't know then that loving him would be like holding fire, beautiful, dangerous, and impossible to contain. But love, for us, wasn't just about stolen moments. It was a battlefield. Chicago wasn't always kind to two men who dared to love each other. Caleb's family, devout and unyielding, called him an abomination. My own father, a retired cop with a temper, hadn't spoken to me since I came out at 19. We carved out our own world, a fragile sanctuary of late-night drives and whispered promises, but the outside world kept clawing at us. The trouble started with Tommy, a regular at O'Malley's where Caleb worked. Tommy was the kind of guy who thrived on cruelty, his slurs cutting deeper than his fists. He'd leer at Caleb, make crude comments, and laugh when Caleb's hand shook while pouring his drink. I'd watch from the corner booth, fists clenched, telling myself to stay calm. Caleb didn't want me starting fights. "We're better than them," he'd say, his voice steady even when his eyes weren't. But Tommy crossed a line one night. I wasn't there, but Caleb told me later, his voice breaking. Tommy had cornered him behind the bar, pinned him against the wall, and whispered threats that made Caleb's skin crawl. When Caleb pushed him away, Tommy left a bruise on his wrist, a mark I saw the next morning, purple and ugly against Caleb's pale skin. I swore I'd make Tommy pay, but Caleb begged me to let it go. "He's not worth it, Ethan," he said, his eyes pleading. I nodded, but the rage in me was a living thing, coiling tighter every day. Weeks passed, and Tommy's taunts grew bolder. He'd follow Caleb home, shouting slurs from his car. I started walking Caleb to and from work, my jaw set, my hands itching for a fight. Caleb hated it, hated the way I was changing. "You're not my bodyguard," he'd snap, but I couldn't stop. I loved him too much to let him face that hate alone. Then came the night that broke us. It was a Friday, the bar packed with the usual crowd, drunk frat boys, tired workers, and Tommy, sitting at the counter like a vulture. I was there, nursing a beer, watching Caleb move with that quiet grace of his. Tommy was louder than usual, his words slurring but sharp, each one a blade aimed at Caleb. I saw the moment Caleb's shoulders tensed, the moment he decided he'd had enough. He walked over to Tommy, calm but firm, and told him to leave. Tommy laughed, stood, and shoved Caleb hard enough to make him stumble. That was it. I was on my feet before I knew it, crossing the bar in 3 strides. My fist connected with Tommy's jaw, and the crack echoed like a gunshot. The bar went silent, all eyes on us. Caleb grabbed my arm, pulling me back, but the damage was done. Tommy spat blood, grinning like he'd won something. "You'll regret that, fag," he hissed, and walked out. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next night, Tommy was waiting in the alley behind the bar, a knife glinting in his hand. Caleb was closing up, and I'd come to walk him home. We didn't see Tommy until he stepped out of the shadows, his eyes wild with hate. "You think you can touch me?" he snarled, lunging at Caleb. I didn't think. I just acted. My gun, the one I'd started carrying after Tommy's threats, was in my hand before I could stop myself. One shot, one moment, and Tommy was on the ground, blood pooling at my feet. Caleb's scream tore through me. He stumbled back, hands shaking, staring at the body, then at me. "Ethan, what have you done?" he whispered, his voice raw with horror. I tried to reach for him, but he flinched, and that flinch was a knife to my heart. "I was protecting you," I said, my voice breaking. But his eyes told me what I already knew. I crossed a line he couldn't follow. "Stay away from me," he said, his voice cold, final. He turned and ran, disappearing into the night. I stood there, the gun heavy in my hand, the blood pooling at my feet, knowing I'd lost him forever. The days after that night blurred into a haze of regret and whiskey. I didn't chase Caleb, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust myself. My hands, the same ones that had held him so gently, had taken a life. I kept seeing his face, the way his eyes had widened with fear, not of Tommy, but of me. I'd become a monster he'd begged me not to be. I hid out of my apartment, a cramped one-bedroom above a laundromat in Logan Square. The walls were thin, the air thick with the smell of detergent and my own guilt. I didn't go to work. I didn't answer my phone. The news was already buzzing with Tommy's death. Local thug, killed in an alley, no witnesses. The police had no leads, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Chicago wasn't a city that let secrets stay buried. Caleb didn't call, didn't text. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping for a sign, any sign, that he hadn't given up on us. But there was nothing. I went to O'Malley's one night, desperate to see him, but the bartender, a gruff guy named Mike, shook his head. He quit, Ethan. Didn't say where he was going. I left before Mike could ask questions, my chest tight with the weight of what I'd lost. I tried to piece together what went wrong, replaying every moment, every choice. I'd always been the protector, the one who stood between Caleb and the world's cruelty. But that night, I'd let the anger win. I let it turn me into something I swore I'd never be. My father's voice echoed in my head, the same voice that had called me weak when I came out. "You know, man," he'd said. Maybe he was right. A week later, I saw Caleb's name in my inbox. My heart stopped. It was a single line. "Meet me at the lake midnight. We need to talk." No signature, no warmth, but it was enough. I'd have crawled across broken glass for a chance to see him again. Lake Michigan was calm that night, the water lapping softly against the shore. The city skyline glittered in the distance, a reminder of how small we were in its shadow. I got there early, pacing the path near Montrose Beach, my hands stuffed in my jacket pockets. When Caleb appeared, my breath caught. He looked tired, his usual brightness dimmed, but he was still the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. "Ethan," he said, his voice low, guarded. He stopped a few feet away, like he was afraid to get too close. "Why did you do it?" I wanted to tell him everything. How I'd been terrified for him, how Tommy's threats had haunted me, how I'd do anything to keep him safe. But the words stuck in my throat. "I didn't mean for it to happen," I said finally, my voice hoarse. I couldn't let him hurt you." Caleb's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "You think that's what I wanted? For you to kill for me?" He shook his head, his hands balling into fists. "You didn't protect me, Ethan. You broke us." I stepped closer, desperate to bridge the gap between us. "I love you, Caleb. I'd do anything to take it back." He flinched again, and it was worse than any punch. "Love isn't supposed to feel like this," he said, his voice cracking. "It's not supposed to destroy everything." We stood there, the silence heavy between us. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him into my arms and make him forget the blood, the gun, the alley. But I couldn't. Not when he was looking at me like I was a stranger. "I'm leaving Chicago," he said finally, his words slicing through me. "I can't stay here. Not after this. And you need to figure out who you are without me." "Caleb, please," I begged, my voice breaking. "Don't do this." But he was already walking away, his silhouette fading into the darkness. I sank to my knees on the cold sand, the lake's whispers mocking me. I thought I was fighting for us, but all I'd done was push him further away. The next morning, I went to his apartment, hoping to change his mind. The door was locked, the windows dark. A neighbor, an older woman with kind eyes, told me he'd left at dawn with a single suitcase. "He looked like he was running from something," she said, her voice soft with pity. I nodded, unable to speak, and walked away. I didn't know where he'd gone, but I knew I couldn't stay still. The police were getting closer. I'd seen a sketch of a suspect on the news, too close to my face for comfort. I had to find Caleb, had to make things right, even if it meant facing what I'd done. I packed a bag, left my apartment, and started searching. Every lead, every rumor, every whisper of his name became my lifeline. The road stretched endless before me, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the heart of America. I've been driving for weeks, chasing shadows of Caleb in every small town and city I passed through. A friend of a friend said he'd seen him in St. Louis, working at a coffee shop. Another swore he was in Minneapolis, painting murals for a community center. Each tip was a spark of hope, quickly snuffed out when I arrived to find nothing but strangers. I was running on fumes, money, energy, sanity. My truck, a beat-up Chevy I'd fixed up myself, groaned with every mile. I slept in the back seat, ate cheap gas station food, and kept a photo of Caleb tucked in my wallet, his smile a reminder of what I was fighting for. But the longer I searched, the more I wondered if I was chasing a ghost. In Des Moines, I hit a dead end. The coffee shop where Caleb was supposedly working had never heard of him. I sat in a diner across the street, staring at my cold coffee, when a news broadcast caught my eye. Tommy's case was still open, and the police had a new lead, a partial fingerprint on the gun. My stomach churned. I'd been careful, but not careful enough. Time was running out. I called Mike, the bartender from O'Malley's, hoping for any news. "Ethan, you gotta stop this," he said, his voice heavy. "Caleb doesn't want to be found, and the cops, they're asking questions." I hung up, my hands shaking. I couldn't stop, not when Caleb was out there, carrying the weight of what I'd done. The next lead took me to Omaha. A mural on a community center wall stopped me in my tracks. It was Caleb's style, bold colors, sweeping lines, a story told in paint. Two figures, hands clasped, standing against a storm. My heart ached. I asked around, but no one knew the artist. I left a note taped to the wall. "Caleb, I'm sorry. I'm still here." Days turned into weeks, each one heavier than the last. I was in Denver when I finally got a break. A barista at a small cafe recognized Caleb's photo. "Yeah, he was here," she said, her eyes narrowing. "He didn't stay long. Said he was heading west, maybe California." I thanked her, my pulse racing. California was a big place, but it was something. I drove through the Rockies, the mountains looming like judges over my guilt. I thought about Caleb, about the life we could have had. Lazy Sundays in bed, his laughter filling our apartment, his paintings covering the walls. I'd been so focused on protecting him that I'd forgotten how to love him the way he needed. I'd turned our love into a war, and I was the one who'd lost. In Salt Lake City, I stopped at a motel to rest. The clerk, a young guy with tired eyes, noticed my worn-out look. "You running from something?" he asked, half joking. I forced a smile. "Chasing something." He nodded, like he understood, and handed me a key. That night, I dreamed of Caleb. We were back at the lake, but this time, he didn't walk away. He took my hand, his touch warm and forgiving. "You're enough," he said, and I believed him. I woke up with tears on my face, the ache in my chest sharper than ever. I kept moving, following every lead, no matter how thin. In Reno, I found another mural, this one unfinished. It was Caleb's work, I was sure of it. A lone figure standing in a field of stars, reaching for something just out of grasp. I sat on the curb, staring at it, wondering if he'd painted it for me. By the time I reached San Francisco, I was barely holding on. The city was alive, vibrant, everything Caleb loved. I wandered the streets, showing his photo to anyone who'd look. Most shook their heads, but one guy, a street artist with paint-stained hands, paused. "I know him," he said. "He's been staying at a shelter downtown. Keeps to himself, but he's been painting." My heart pounded as I followed the guy's directions to the shelter. It was a run-down building, the kind of place that smelled of despair. I waited outside, my hands trembling, until I saw him. Caleb, thinner than I remembered, his hair longer, but still him. He was carrying a sketchbook, his eyes distant. I called his name, and he froze. "Ethan," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't run, but he didn't come closer either. We stood there, the weight of everything between us, and I knew this was my last chance. "Caleb," I said again, my voice cracking. The San Francisco street buzzed around us. Cars honking, people rushing past, but it felt like we were the only two people in the world. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw the Caleb I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd made me believe in something bigger than myself. "Why are you here, Ethan?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with pain. He clutched his sketchbook like a shield, his knuckles white. I wanted to close the distance, to hold him, but the look in his eyes kept me rooted to the spot. "I had to find you," I said, the words spilling out. "I couldn't let you go without telling you I'm sorry. For everything. For Tommy, for the gun, for making you feel like you had to run." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "You don't get it, do you? It's not just about Tommy. It's about you thinking you had to fight my battles for me. You took away my choice, Ethan. You made me feel like I was something to be saved, not someone to be loved." His words hit like a punch, stealing my breath. I'd thought I was protecting him, but all I'd done was push him away. "I was wrong," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know that now. But I love you, Caleb. I've always loved you." He looked away, his eyes glistening. "Love isn't enough sometimes," he said softly. "Not when it comes with blood." I stepped closer, desperate. "Let me make it right. Please. I'll do whatever it takes." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened his sketchbook and handed it to me. The pages were filled with his art. Landscapes, faces, moments captured in color. The last page stopped me cold. It was us sitting on my truck under the stars, the night we first kissed. My throat tightened. "You kept this," I said, my voice breaking. "I couldn't let it go," he admitted, his voice raw. "But that doesn't mean I can go back." We talked for hours, sitting on a bench outside the shelter. He told me about the past months, how he'd been moving from city to city, painting to survive, trying to outrun the memories. I told him about my search, the guilt that ate at me, the fear of losing him forever. It wasn't easy. There were tears, anger, moments when I thought he'd walk away again. But he stayed, and that was enough for now. Caleb agreed to let me stay in San Francisco, to try to rebuild something. Not love, not yet, but trust. We found a cheap apartment in the Mission District, a place with peeling paint and creaky floors. But it was ours. I got a job at a garage, and Caleb started painting again, his work filling the walls with color. We were careful with each other, like we were handling something fragile, but every smile, every touch felt like a step toward something new. The police were still a shadow over us. I'd ditched the gun long ago, but the news reports kept circling, closer each time. I knew I couldn't run forever, but I wasn't ready to lose Caleb again. Not when we were just starting to find our way back. One night, Caleb came home with a canvas under his arm. "I painted this for you," he said, his voice shy. It was a portrait of me, not the angry man from the alley, but the one he'd seen that first night, laughing under the stars. "This is who you are, Ethan," he said. "Not what you did." I pulled him into my arms, and for the first time in months, he didn't pull away. We stood there, holding each other, The weight of the past is still there, but lighter somehow. I knew we weren't fixed. Not completely, but we were trying. And that was enough. But the past has a way of catching up. A week later, I saw a cop car parked outside the garage. My boss, a gruff man named Joe, called me over. "Some detective was asking about you," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Said it's about a case in Chicago. You in trouble, Ethan?" I shook my head, my heart pounding. "Just a misunderstanding," I lied. But I knew the truth. Time was running out, and I had to make a choice: keep running or face what I'd done. That night, I told Caleb everything. The fingerprints, the police, my fear of losing him again. He listened, his face unreadable. When I finished, he took my hand, his grip firm. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." The San Francisco fog wrapped around us like a shroud as Caleb and I sat on the roof of our building. The city's lights blurred below. His hand was in mine, warm and steady, but the weight of what was coming pressed against my chest. The police were closing in, and I couldn't outrun them anymore. I'd spent months chasing Caleb, trying to fix what I'd broken, but now I had to face the consequences of that night in the alley. "I'm turning myself in," I said, the words heavy but sure. Caleb's grip tightened, his eyes searching mine. "Ethan, no," he whispered. "They'll take you away." "They might," I admitted, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. "But I can't keep running. Not from this. Not if I want to be the man you deserve." He didn't argue, but the tears in his eyes said enough. We sat in silence, the fog curling around us, until he leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice small. "I just got you back." "I'm scared too," I said, kissing his forehead. "But I need to do this. For us." The next morning, I walked into the San Francisco police station, Caleb at my side. The detective, a stern woman with sharp eyes, listened as I told her everything. Tommy's threats, the alley, the gun. I didn't sugarcoat it. I'd killed a man, and no matter the reason, I had to own it. Caleb held my hand under the table, his presence the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The legal process was a blur. Lawyers, hearings, endless questions. The media got wind of it, and soon our story was everywhere. Two men in love, torn apart by violence and hate, fighting to find their way back. Some called me a hero, others a murderer. I didn't care about their labels. I only cared about Caleb, who showed up every day, his sketchbook filled with drawings of us, reminders of what we were fighting for. The trial was brutal. Tommy's family painted him as a saint, conveniently forgetting his cruelty. My lawyer argued self-defense, but the truth was messier. I'd acted to protect Caleb, but I'd also let my anger take over. The jury deliberated for 3 days, and when the verdict came, manslaughter, not murder, I felt no relief, only exhaustion. The sentence was 5 years, with a chance for parole in 3. Caleb's face crumpled when the gavel fell, but he didn't leave my side. In the holding cell, he pressed his hand against the glass, his eyes locked on mine. "I'll wait for you," he said, his voice fierce. "I love you, Ethan. Always." The prison was cold, gray, a world away from Caleb's warmth. But his letters kept me going, pages filled with stories, sketches, promises of a future we'd build together. He visited every month, his smile a lifeline through the bars. He was painting again, his work gaining attention in galleries, his talent finally shining. I was proud, even if I couldn't be there to see it. 3 years later, I walked out of prison changed man. Caleb was waiting, his hair shorter, his eyes brighter. He ran to me, and I held him so tightly I thought I'd never let go. The world hadn't changed. There was still hate, still judgment, but we were stronger. We'd face the worst and come out the other side. We moved to a small town in Oregon, a place where the air smelled of pine and the stars felt close enough to touch. Caleb opened a studio, and I found work fixing cars, my hands steady again. Our house was small, filled with his paintings and our laughter. Every night, we sat on the porch, holding hands, watching the sunset. The blood that had pooled at my feet that night in Chicago was a memory now, a scar we both carried. But it didn't define us. We'd fought for our love, through pain and loss, and found something unbreakable. Caleb's final warning had been a wake-up call, a chance to become better, to choose love over anger. As I looked at him one evening, his face glowing in the twilight, I knew I'd never lose him again. We'd built something real, something worth every tear, every fight. And in that moment, with his hand in mine, I understood love wasn't just about holding on. It was about letting go of the things that tried to tear us apart.